Rise of Resilience, a story of overcoming failure. The echo of rejection. Your work, it's uninspired. The judge's voice was clipped, disinterested. A few polite claps echoed in the sterile gallery as Mia Carter's painting was wheeled away, her dream along with it. Mia stood frozen, the hum of murmured conversations and shuffling feet around her fading into a dull roar. This was supposed to be her breakthrough, a chance to showcase her talent in front of critics and collectors. Instead, it felt like the universe had slammed a door in her face. The gallery, filled with confident artists, architects, and collectors, seemed to close in on her. She glanced around at the polished faces of the attendees, who were already moving on to the next piece. Her heart sank. How could they just move on like that? She had poured everything into this work, and now it felt like her world was collapsing. The painting, a chaotic blend of colors meant to represent the turbulence of modern life, sat in the corner of the room like a neglected child. The judge had dismissed it without a second glance, without understanding the depth of emotion that had gone into it. As she stepped outside into the crisp autumn air, the tears she had been holding back finally spilled over. How could she have been so naive to think she could succeed in a world so cutthroat, so unforgiving? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Text from her mother. She hesitated before reading them, knowing what was coming. "Did you get any offers, honey? I hope you're not disappointed, but it's not too late to try something else." Mia wiped her tears, angry at herself for caring about the approval of strangers. But that anger was mixed with a heavy sense of shame. How would she ever explain this to her family, who had always pushed her to do something more stable? Her dreams of becoming a renowned muralist seemed laughable now. She stood there for a long time, letting the cold wind sting her face, as if trying to numb the ache in her chest. Mia had spent years honing her craft, studying, practicing, sacrificing. But in that moment, none of it seemed to matter. It felt like all her effort had been for nothing. Chapter 2. The Fall. In the weeks that followed, Mia retreated further into herself. The rejection from the gallery had become a loud, persistent voice in her mind, drowning out everything else. She couldn't bring herself to paint. How could she, when the world had just told her she wasn't good enough? The doubt seeped into her bones, growing like a dark cloud that hovered over every thought. Her small apartment, once a sanctuary of creativity, now felt suffocating. She moved through it in a haze, unwilling to face the canvases stacked against the walls, the half-finished sketches scattered across the floor. Her rent was due, and her bank account was dangerously low. She hadn't received any commissions, and the last few months had drained her savings. The bills kept piling up, and she had no idea how she was going to keep her head above water. The only thing keeping her afloat was the occasional gig painting signs for local businesses, a far cry from the grand mural projects she had dreamed of. But even those seemed to dry up. No one was interested in hiring a failed artist. As she wandered through the crowded streets of the city, Mia couldn't help but notice the murals that lined the buildings, vibrant, alive with energy, each telling a story. But all she could see was her own failure. They mocked her. They were everything she wasn't. Her thoughts turned darker. What if she never made it? What if she was destined to be one of those artists whose dreams crumbled into dust? She wanted to talk to her family, to find comfort in their words. But she couldn't bring herself to do it. Her mother's expectations felt too heavy. Mia had always been the dreamer in the family, the one who would make it big and prove that taking risks was worth it. Now, she wasn't sure how to face her. Chapter 3. The Turning Point. It wasn't until Mia ran into Elena, a retired artist she had once admired, that things began to shift. Elena had been a successful muralist in the 90s, but she had disappeared from the art scene years ago. Mia had heard rumors that Elena had experienced her own struggles with failure and had taken a step back from the public eye. Elena found Mia at a coffee shop one rainy afternoon. The older woman had a keen eye, spotting Mia's weariness even before she spoke. "You look like you've seen a few battles," Elena said, her voice calm, measured. Mia tried to dismiss it with a smile, but Elena wasn't fooled. She invited Mia to her small studio, an old loft filled with canvases and sculptures, and it was there that the conversation turned from pleasantries to something deeper. "I've been where you are," Elena said. "I know the crushing weight of failure. I know what it's like to feel like the world has forgotten you. But the key is not to run from it, to not let failure define you." Mia listened intently as Elena shared her own story. How she had once faced public rejection, struggled with the business side of art, and nearly gave up. But instead of letting that failure destroy her, she embraced it, used it as fuel to redefine her art and her purpose. "You're not just painting to please anyone. You're painting for yourself," Elena said softly. "Your emotions, your soul. Put it all on that canvas. Don't try to fit into what others expect." It was a perspective Mia had never considered before. She had always painted with the hope of impressing others, of seeking validation. But what if she could create something that was just for her? Something raw, unrefined, and real? Elena handed her a brush, a small, delicate one, and placed it in Mia's hand. "Try it," she said, "for the grind." Chapter 4, The Grind. The days that followed her meeting with Elena were a blur of paint, frustration, and small victories. Elena's advice echoed in Mia's mind constantly. Paint for yourself. Let the pain guide you. But Mia had a hard time letting go of her old mindset. She was so used to trying to perfect everything. Every brushstroke, every line, every detail had to be immaculate. It was how she had approached her work all her life. Yet, Elena's words slowly began to unearth something deeper inside her, something raw and vulnerable. At first, Mia wasn't sure what to make of the chaos that emerged on her canvas. She painted with reckless abandon, spilling dark blues, fiery reds, and jarring yellows onto the fabric of her soul. Each piece seemed to reflect a piece of her pain, her fear of failure, her loneliness, the voices of doubt that had haunted her for years. But no matter how much she painted, it never felt quite right. She was still holding back, still trying to control every element of the process. One night, frustrated by the lack of progress, Mia sat on the floor of her small studio, staring at a blank canvas. She had poured her heart into the last painting, and yet it was still lifeless. The colors felt flat, the brushstrokes too cautious. Her phone buzzed, snapping her from her thoughts. It was Elena. "Don't be afraid to make a mess. Art is messy. Life is messy. Let it be." Mia stared at the message, feeling the weight of those words. She had been so consumed with creating something perfect that she had forgotten what it meant to be human. The messy, the imperfect, the vulnerable, those were the things that made art and life meaningful. That night, Mia put down her brushes and picked up a large, flat knife from her toolbox. She used it to scrape and smear the paint across the canvas, twisting and contorting the colors. It felt liberating. For the first time in a long while, Mia felt like she wasn't trying to force something into being. She was simply allowing it to unfold. When she stepped back, she gasped. The painting was a riot of color, wild and untamed. It was alive. It wasn't perfect, but it was full of emotion. The faces, the shapes, the layers, they all seemed to tell a story. Her story. But even as Mia felt a flicker of pride, doubt crept in. Would anyone appreciate this? Was this the kind of art that would win her respect in the art world? She sent a photo of the piece to Elena. The reply was swift. "Now that's something. Don't hold back. The world will see it when you stop hiding behind perfection." Chapter 5, The Breakthrough. Mia's new approach to painting was transformative. She stopped focusing on what others might think and began to paint for herself. But even so, the path forward wasn't easy. For every painting she created that felt authentic and powerful, there were others that felt disjointed or half-finished. And then came the opportunity. A local community center reached out to her, asking if she would consider creating a mural for their newly renovated space. It was a modest project, not the grand public commission she had dreamed of, but it was an opportunity nonetheless. Mia was nervous. This was the moment she had been waiting for, but she couldn't shake the fear of failure. What if her new style wasn't right for a public mural? What if the community didn't like it? Elena could sense Mia's hesitation. "You can do this," she said. "Just remember, you're not painting for approval. You're painting for change. Let your story flow into that wall, and everything will fall into place." Mia nodded. She took a deep breath, packed her supplies, and headed to the community center. The first day on the mural was harder than Mia had expected. The wall was vast, much larger than any canvas she had worked with before. The scale was daunting. The brushstrokes felt small, insufficient against the enormity of the surface. And as she began to add layers of color, she couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. Would people see what she was trying to express? For hours, Mia worked in silence, losing herself in the rhythm of her brush. As the mural took shape, the story began to emerge, a visual representation of resilience drawn from the hardships she had faced. It depicted a figure standing tall against a storm, with waves crashing around them, yet they remained unbroken. But as the mural neared completion, local residents began to gather around the center. At first, there were whispers, quiet murmurs of approval. Then, as more people arrived, Mia could feel the weight of their eyes on her. She tried not to let it distract her, but it was impossible not to feel vulnerable, exposed. Finally, on the last day, the mural was ready. Mia stepped back and wiped the sweat from her brow, her heart pounding. The mural was far from perfect. There were flaws, mistakes, rough edges, but it was real. It felt like her, like everything she had been through, all the pain and the lessons and the growth. The unveiling ceremony was scheduled for the following weekend. The room was filled with anticipation as Mia stood beside the mural, her hands shaking. The mayor, local artists, and a handful of community leaders stood in front, waiting for the moment of revelation. With a dramatic flourish, the cloth was pulled away. The crowd fell silent, taking in the mural in awe. There was no applause at first, just hushed whispers. Mia's heart raced. Was it too much? Had she gone too far? Then, slowly, the whispers turned into applause. People began to cheer, and within moments, the room erupted in excitement. A group of children rushed forward, pointing at the mural and shouting out what they saw. "That's me. That's my mom. That's the storm we went through." Mia's heart swelled with pride. For the first time, she wasn't painting for recognition or approval. She was painting to connect, to speak to people who had faced struggles of their own. She had found her purpose. Chapter 6. The Climax. In the months that followed, Mia's mural became a symbol of the community's resilience. It was featured in local news outlets, drawing attention from larger organizations who sought her out for new commissions. Her style, once considered unpolished, had found an audience, one that appreciated the raw, emotional authenticity behind her work. Mia was invited to larger projects, each more challenging than the last. She began to collaborate with other artists and engage with communities in ways she had never imagined. Her art started to take on a life of its own, telling stories that resonated with people from all walks of life. One day, she received a call from a major city project, an opportunity to paint the largest mural of her career. The mayor had seen her work and wanted Mia to create a piece that would stand as a testament to the city's growth and resilience. But even as the excitement of this new opportunity washed over her, Mia felt something unexpected: fear. What if she couldn't live up to the expectations? What if this was her next failure? Elena's voice echoed in her mind. "The only failure is the one you never overcome. You've already come so far." Mia took a deep breath and smiled. She was ready. Chapter 7. Resolution and Legacy. The mural Mia completed for the city was a culmination of everything she had learned over the past few years. It was a grand piece, stretching across a building that overlooked the city square. But beyond its size and impact, it carried something deeper: the story of an artist who had fought her inner battles and found a way to connect with the world. Mia became a mentor, offering workshops to young artists who were struggling with the same doubts and fears she once had. She created an art program for underprivileged youth, teaching them not just how to paint, but how to express their emotions and find strength in their vulnerability. As Mia stood before a blank wall, ready to create her next masterpiece, she smiled to herself. The journey wasn't over. There would be more failures, more challenges. But she knew now that failure wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something new. And with each brushstroke, she was telling her story. A story of resilience, hope, and the unshakable belief that even in the face of failure, there was always room to rise again.